process of calculating fertilizer needs as we do the calculations. And I'm pulling these slides from, I have created this presentation out of the training program that when I was a part of the University of California Cooperative Extension, we did a series of training on nitrogen management. So this is the part of that training. This is the nitrogen cycle. So, we apply our nitrogen through different sources. We have some compost and manure. In California, you can find a lot of nitrogen in the form of nitrate in the groundwater. And then any remaining nitrogen needs you want to meet, you will apply your commercial fertilizer, right? So those nutrients, particularly nitrogen, has different fates. It could be taken up by the tree, or it could be bound into organic matter and mineralized, and then go back and forth in that cycle. It could also be lost down again below the root zone. So basically, there's a constant mineralization and fixation going on. Some nitrogen can be fixed permanently in the form of organic matter, and some can be actually converted to the mineral form. And then there is also volatilization, which basically the nitrogen loss can occur into the air. On this side, you're removing your a lot of nutrients, and in this particular reference, we're talking about nitrogen. So you're removing a lot of nitrogen in the form of the harvested nuts that you're taking out of the crop or out of the orchard. Plus, you're also pruning to some extent annually, and you're removing some in terms of prunings. So you would need to meet the demands of nitrogen demands of the tree in terms of two major portions. One is the portion of nitrogen needed to support your crop. Another, the portion of nitrogen that's needed to support your annual vegetative growth. So the researchers in California have developed this management strategy that they call 4 rights, which is the right rate, calculating how much how much dose of nitrogen your trees will need in the form of these two demands for producing the crop and for producing the vegetative growth. Then there is right time. So when, and we will talk about that, and I will show you the graph, when in the season your trees are most demanding in their nitrogen demand. Right place. Your nitrogen need to go at the right place where it is most likely to be picked up. Obviously, in an irrigated scenario, your nitrogen will go where your water is going, because it will be picked up as part of the soil solution. And the last one, right source. So we talked briefly about the different sources, and your choice of your sources can really depend on a lot of factors like your soil type and your other compounding factors, your interaction. Some sources can really plug your irrigation system, so you have to be mindful of those. And the last one, I have not mentioned it here. They came up with the 5th one, right monitoring. So they're now laying more emphasis on monitoring. So you have to know the levels throughout the year. So basically what you do is you have a demand side and a supply side. So you try to calculate the tree demand, and then you try to calculate different sources where you are applying that fertilizer to add up all these supply side equations to be equal to the tree demand. This is a table pulled from various sources based on different research. These are for the other fruit crops, quantity, and it is in kilograms per hectare total nitrogen uptake. For the almonds, we have worked out in California in terms of pounds of nitrogen removed for 1,000 kernel pounds, which I try to convert like this. So we need 31 kilogram of nitrogen for every 455 kilogram of kernel yield based on non-pro variety of California. Okay. So how much 1,000 kilogram kernels will remove? Basically, the basic number that is based on California research is 68 pounds of nitrogen. Actual nitrogen is needed to produce 1,000 pounds of kernel in case of non-pro variety. So you can note down this number based on California research on this particular variety. 68 pounds nitrogen removed in 1,000 kernel pounds for non-pro. And then you can work your removal numbers. I'm sure there will be data available on other cultivars, some European cultivars. I don't have experience of working with European cultivars, but probably it will be in the same ballpark number. The second component is the nitrogen needed for growth. Yes. Can you please get the mic?
Yes. With Mediterranean varieties, we always thought more or less 31 units of nitrogen per every 1,000 kilograms in shell.
Okay.
Okay, this is more or less the average that we work. Okay, and I saw that non-parallel is more efficient because Californian varieties are more efficient in photosynthetic terms to produce kernel than Mediterranean varieties. This is very clear, no? Because non-parallel can have 60% of the yield in kernel, no? And with Mediterranean variety, we can arrive to water, for example, a 45 or 47 maximum. But the average is 30, 31, 27 yield of the kernel, no? More or less. And if we make the comparison with the Mediterranean varieties, the 35 units of nitrogen per every 1,000 kilograms in shell that the tree demand, this is the double, no? More or less.
Yes, so... Yeah,
because non-parallel is 60% of the yield. You have, in 1 kilogram of the non-parallel shell, you have 600 grams of kernel. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah. And you brought, or I can see that for 45 kilograms of kernel.
This comes to about 900, roughly around 900 kilograms of in shell.
Yeah.
We'll need 31 kilograms. Right?
But it's 45 kilograms in kernel.
455.
No, 455 kilogram kernel.
Yeah, yeah.
So
and you need 31 kilograms of nitrogen.
So divided by 0.6. Let's
Yeah.
see. 455 divided by 0.6. It is 758, right? So mathematically it comes to 758. So we have 31 kilograms removed in 758 in shell.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So 758 removes 1 kilogram.
Yeah.
So let's see. Times 31 divided by 1,000. Okay, 31 divided by 758 times. So this comes to 41. This comes to 41.
It's over our.
So your estimation or your knowledge based on the Mediterranean varieties was about 30.
We always talk in general. The demand of the tree for produce 1,000 kilograms in shell per hectare needs implement or needs to give The dose is more or less there's 35 units.
35.
Yes.
Okay.
More or less, we speak about that in general.
Right. This comes to 41. So in case of non-parallel, I'm saying that
Okay.
41. So basically, yeah,
Okay.
so we are applying a bit higher.
But in the other side, non-parallel produce less kilograms in shell and in kernel.
Yes, non-parallel is relatively lower,
Yes,
even
yes,
in comparison to
it's lower. The weight is lower than Antonieta or Marinada or some other Mediterranean varieties.
Even in comparison with some California type varieties, non-parallel is lower,
Okay.
lower yielding. But in terms of the nut quality and the nut size, it actually, and the price, basically non-parallel catches up.
Yeah.
But in terms of yield, in comparison with California type, non-parallel is much reduced.
And non-parallel has it's a branch.
Right. So another dimension is the growth requirement. Again, I have in terms of pounds, but as a rule of thumb from the knowledge, that when you have the young tree yielding less than 1,000 pounds, which means 1,100 kilograms per hectare, less than 1,100 kilograms per hectare yield, that means the trees are really young. That means those trees are going to need higher amount of nitrogen per hectare, right? So this comes around 33, 34 pounds or kilograms per hectare. As the trees grow big, now their nitrogen requirements for the growth is basically reducing because they are not putting as much exponential vegetative growth. And fully mature trees, when they achieve full yield potential, you basically apply, account for zero nitrogen towards new growth. So that's what we have in calculation in California. Supply sources. There could be any different supply sources. For example, you have any compost or organic source, then how much water you are applying, which might not be the case here. So we can talk about that if that applies. And then your fertilizer input. For example, if you have 4 tons of compost with 0.5% of nitrogen released per year, so you multiply 4,000 kilograms by 0.005. So basically you will get 20 kilograms of nitrogen per year from your compost. So now this is just an example. You would read your compost analysis and then come up with your numbers, right? But this is basically, this formula or this slide is to show that, okay, you can account for how much nitrogen is coming from your compost in order to optimize your fertilizer input. If you don't take that into consideration and you're applying nitrogen without taking this into account, you may be over-applying. Okay. I tried to convert this into kilogram per hectare based on the yield. So this is what I came up with. Up to 1,100 kilograms per hectare, the young trees. The tree nitrogen demand in kilogram per hectare would be 112. Goes all the way for the mature trees to 300. And that is the proportion of annual budget that goes to vegetation. So the percentage of annual budget that goes to vegetation is actually declines as a percentage of total nitrogen budget. Because obviously, as the tree becomes mature, it has bigger share of that nitrogen going to the crop production. So in the young trees, 44% of your applied nitrogen is going to actually enhance your vegetative growth. In case of mature, it's only 1%. This is a nitrogen application study. This basically really shows that applying more nitrogen than needed does not necessarily result in greater nitrogen uptake by the fruit. Okay, this is a very important learning, but it does increase the potential for leaching losses. Okay? So more nitrogen is always not beneficial. It can, in fact, create some problems. There is less vegetative growth when yield is high, even when nitrogen is applied in excess. So So basically nitrogen production, nitrogen application response increases with increasing nitrogen from 0, but it has a plateau. You achieve the maximum at some point, and then your yield starts declining at some point. So with nitrogen application, you have to be careful. Nitrogen in the soil, you need to keep up with your soil analysis report to see how much nitrogen you have, residual nitrogen in your soil. This is more important for annual crops on an annual cycle basis, but you still need to monitor your soil nitrogen every now and then. Organic matter, we already talked about organic matter. And CN ratio is also important in your organic matter to see how actively your trees can get nitrogen out of your organic matter. Okay? So lower CN ratio will mean that your nitrogen will be more readily available. Okay? So this is again to show that the full nitrogen cycle, including ammonification, nitrification, assimilation, denitrification, and volatilization. There is, let me go to this chart. So this is the chart that I was really talking about. How in the season, starting with January, in case of California almonds, how in the season the demand for the nitrogen picks up early in the season. So these red bars are basically the cranial tissues that you have the reserves in. And then this yellow is the annual demand. Okay? So annual demand, that means that your crop cycle is basically demanding that nitrogen. And as your trees are basically blooming and at the fruit set stage here, your nitrogen requirement starts increasing exponentially. And through the period of rapid size expansion and then kernel solidification and all the way to basically nut maturity, that's when the nuts are the biggest sinks of nitrogen. And that's the period of greatest nitrogen demand and greatest nitrogen application in season. So this 20, 30, 30, this adds up to 80%. So that's what I meant when I said we apply 80% of the total budgeted nitrogen in this zone, pretty much until. So now, based on this, in practical situations, we do not keep on applying nitrogen until mid-July because that is going to complicate the hull split and hull rot issues. So practically, we just apply 80% up to this point, up to the end of May through early June. Okay, and then we wait through the month of July, and then the rest 20% we can adjust based on the July samples. What we see in the July samples, if you have more than sufficient levels of nitrogen in your July sample, then you can really cut back. You can reduce this to 10% or even decide not to apply. So, because now by the time this is post-harvest time, you already have your nitrogen test reports from your leaf. So, this is basically stressing on the time of application when the trees really need. Right source, honestly, I will not have much information on the right sources unless I explore more together with you on your, the soil zone environment and type of soils and availability of different nutrients and pH and all of that. But for the sake of young trees, I just made a comment yesterday that nitrogen is nitrogen as long as the trees are getting it. But your overall orchard system complicates the choice of which source you use. But you need to keep in mind certain factors, like if you're using urea-based nitrogen sources, then you have to factor in the time needed for conversion of urea to ammonium. It takes a couple of weeks, depending on the microbial activity and the soil temperature and all of that. But then it it takes a couple of days from further conversion of ammonium form to the nitrate. Okay. So this is the place where actually your nitrogen uptake will occur. And this is where really the depth of fine feeding root zone comes into the picture. The almond's fine feeding root zone roots are concentrated in the top 3 to 18 inches of the soil profile. Okay, so really you don't want to push your nitrogen or your nutrition down below in the lower parts of the root zone because they will be rendering really low. This is just to a slide to basically show you the root architecture of absence for nutrient interaction. This is again this is a good chart for reference. You can take a picture of how different sources of nitrogen move in different textures of soil. This is a comparison with the clay soil, with loam soil, and sandy loam soil. And this is to compare 3 sources: ammonium sulfate, urea, and calcium nitrate. So we talked about ammonium sulfate. Now, this is after 90 minutes of applying your nitrogen through irrigation. After 90 minutes, where your fertilizer is going. In the clay, if you applied ammonium sulfate, it's still sitting at the top, right? Whereas in sandy loam soil, your ammonium sulfate is moving down a little bit, but not so much as your calcium nitrate. What happens to calcium nitrate? Within 90 minutes, in the sandy loam soil, your calcium nitrate is down at like 7.5 to 9 inches of depth already. So this is how your leaching potential varies with the choice of your source.
So urea is kind of in between.
So urea is in between calcium nitrate and ammonium sulfate, yeah?
Yeah. So it's really an interaction between the source and the soil texture.
It's the best. No? It does not go too deep. I mean, it's only 19 minutes.
Yeah.
But after 19 minutes, it could go down more. I mean, calcium nitrate and others too.
Yeah.
But if, for example, ammonium sulfate stays too long on the surface, you have much more loss of the nitrogen.
In case of ammonium sulfate?
Yeah, if it stays on the upper layer of the soil for a long time, you have more losses of nitrogen. Why not?
Because you don't have leaching. Yeah, you are
No bleaching, but in the summer you have evaporation.
Yeah, now it really depends on your soil type. So if you have sandy loam soil, yes, and we're just showing this chart for reference to compare between these 3 sources. It's within 90 minutes. And so you can see some activity in the lower portion. And 3 inches, 4.5 inches, 6 inches is the uptake zone, basically.
Question is,
yes.
how much are you losing with evaporation? I mean, you are losing with the leaching, the nitrogen, and you can lose with evaporation as well. And if the other was asking if it stays on the surface, then it will evaporate, or not.
I mean, compared to urea and calcium nitrate.
I'm not really sure on that question because it's not going to evaporate as a product, but there could be some changes in chemical composition, and if you have free nitrogen and through the process of volatilization, that's how I can see nitrogen escaping from soil surface. But I don't see that happening in CFC within 90 minutes of an irrigation. If it is already starting to get down into the feeder roots, I don't see a problem, because now another thing is, this is within 90 minutes of irrigation. Whenever you apply your nitrogen or any fertilizer through fertigation, you apply that in the middle of the fertigation set. So you run your system before application. You don't apply in the beginning of the system because if you apply that and then run your irrigation system for 10 hours, everything will go down. You don't apply at the end because then you will have your fertilizer stay at the top and not get to the roots. So in the middle of the irrigation set, you time your application of injection right in the middle so that you have enough water application that pushes that fertilizer down. So that's one of the things to keep in mind. When in your set you're doing your injection.
But in general, you can lose more with by leaching than by evaporation. Right.
Yeah. So if I have to answer your question based on my theoretical knowledge, I would say yes. Yeah. So.
ერთი კითხვა მაქვს კიდევ რა პერიოდი საჭირო იმისთვის რომ სასუქები შევიტანოთ, ანუ დროში გამოხატული. ნახევარი საათი, 40 წუთი.
Okay. There's not one answer to that question. That will really depend on a lot of management factors and how much you need to apply, how much injection, your solution concentration, how much you're injecting. So, and then it will all depend on your runtime of your irrigation set. So, there is no one answer that I can give you at this time, at this level of discussion. So, you and your nutritional manager or whoever you're working with in terms of your source of your nutrition and the concentration that you're applying in the solution and that concentration in terms of parts per million you are injecting. So those are the factors that you will actually consider in calculating how much time. So that's all I can say at this time. Yes.
So you had example what was the uptake by the kernel on a non-parallel. Is that 455 kilo kernel uptakes around 31 kilos nitrogen. So and we are calculating the demand uptake plus vegetative growth. But is there a difference between the varieties? Some varieties, for example, create 1 ton of kernel needs more nitrogen, some less. So, do we need to create fertigation system according to variety, or it's just the same because it's almond, it's the same for all of them?
No, there is definitely varietal difference, and I can tell you the data from two varieties that we work with, mostly Nonpareil and Monterey, and those two varieties are different in their nitrogen uptake. So, for example, this study showed 68 pounds of nitrogen for Nonpareil. For Monterey, it's different. I don't remember, but I can pull up that information. But it's a different number for Monterey. So yes, and then this is just a number for reference. The varieties that you are working with here, the Mediterranean varieties, the European varieties, you will need to find out what the research says and then go with those numbers.
And then we should know what would be the total yield per hectare and then calculate it.
Yeah, so what is the total yield? And then before I forget, I did not talk about the efficiency factor because in water calculations we estimated at drip irrigation is 90% efficient. So we need to actually increase. Nitrogen application is again, it's even less efficient in California, practical California situations. It's only 50% efficient. So 50% losses at this time as we speak. We are trying to increase the nitrogen uptake efficiency to 70%, but it's really hard to achieve. So you need to factor in that efficiency factor in the
So we talked about the nutrient mobility in a plant and in the soil. So my question is actually not for the plants which are already mature and grow yield and cover all the area what we gave for them. I mean for the first 1, 2 or 3 years before they take the area. Can I come to the board and kind of draw what they mean? So, for example, if this line is our lateral, and we have drip nets, one is placed here, another is here, another is here. And
Draw another plant as well.
yeah, one is just
Scenario.
okay. Another plant is somewhere, maybe I don't know here, and it is like this. Not great thing. But for example, we are giving phosphorus, which is not mobile in the soil, and we know to give plant maybe 50 kilo per hectare first year, and this phosphorus together with the water is coming here and here, everywhere, am I right? Wherever we have drip nets.
So where you have the wetted zone, right?
Yes, but our root does not reach this area.
Yet.
Oh, like the lower?
No, I mean,
Between the trees there is no roots yet.
Yes, lateral is long.
Between the level, between the drip emitters, you're
Yes,
saying.
There is a lot of fertilizer. We are losing the fertilizer.
Oh, so okay. So okay.
I understand we are losing, but I mean, should we, and we might know how many drippers will be exactly with the plant. Should we give more, I mean, to compensate this loss? Should we give more, or should just leave the way it is?
ვერ მიხდამ გონი რატო იკარგება ფესვები რო არ არის
ისე დახატე შერო გადმულია დახატ ცოტა ისე რომ გადმული არის ფესვები.
It's
My-
not roots are.
My understanding is
პატარა მცენარის შემთხვევაში.
when the tree is too small and roots are
Roots
not touching each other,
right.
the water going
All right.
inside.
Okay. Now I got the point. Right. So now, because you were talking about the smaller. Yeah. And
How can we calculate how many drippers per tree? 2 drippers which are closer to the root system, or
Yes. So that really, that really brings an interesting point into discussion, because that happens same when you calculate the water requirement, because now you are wasting some water in the middle, and the trees are only like tiny 1-year-old trees, so you're wasting water in the middle. So again, see, the things become really complicated when you are actually start discussing scenarios. So I did bring that slide into picture where you only now, for the younger trees, based on their canopy size development, even in the water, for example, in one example, we put like 35%. So we basically calculated that 2-year-old trees or 3-year-old trees, based on their canopy size, then you are only effectively looking at 35% area. So that is your root zone coverage as percentage of the total. So again, I would like to stress this, that we, in this interaction, we are just only trying to touch certain aspects of it, and in no way we would be able to discuss those scenarios in detail. So don't, try to use this opportunity as we discuss this to have further exploration. For example, a factor of 35%, I have a slide that I can show you. On the younger trees, you calculate all the tree water demand, but you now say that, okay, my root zone area is only 35% of the total orchard floor. So you have to factor in that into your ET calculation. Same way, your fertilizer.
So we need.
In this case, I can give more phosphorus because first
Not
few years
only
before-
phosphorus, everything, water,
Yeah.
nitrogen.
So you,
Nitrogen I will lose. No, okay.
You use phosphorus.
No, phosphorus maybe after it's not that mobile in the soil. So maybe after 2 or 3 years, the root will reach the area where it is, and I can cut down the amounts on third year because I gave 2 years advance.
Right.
So I can do that, but with nitrogen I cannot do that.
Okay, you lose nitrogen, but if you don't apply enough, then you lose the plant.
so yeah, I mean that's the situation that you unless you really apply your fertilizer around the plant, which is really not a practical way. If you are applying through the fully installed drip system, that's how you apply your water, and that's how you don't have a way to, unless you plug those emitters in the initial years. But otherwise you're applying, but you're accounting for that size of the root zone, and it really comes to per tree. Now, does it make sense then what we discussed yesterday after the sessions, when we were calculating in applying this much nitrogen for every single tree? Now you can go back to the smaller tree that you say, okay, I have 16 emitters in this area where there are 2 trees, but my root zone is only being served by 4 emitters out of those 16. And how much water and how much nitrogen those 4 emitters are giving to that small tree. So then am I catching up with the tree's requirement with those? So that's the calculation that you will really need to do based on your situation on a per tree basis. So you can go back to the per tree, how much your tree needs, because these calculations are assuming 80% full orchard, canopy cover, and then the further adjustment you make back.
What is the best solution for that? I mean, maybe the solution would be that you need to have drippers plugged or closed, or somehow you have the drippers that you need to drill and install, and when you have younger plants, you just have drippers installed with the younger plants, and then later when it grows, you add the outcomes.
Yeah.
This is the
I have
idea.
seen.
But this requires more attention, I think. Okay, roots are not there, but when you are irrigating, I don't know when, but you need to maybe check roots regularly. So with irrigation area where is not root, you are kind of letting roots to grow wider.
Exactly.
But if you blind them, then root will stay wherever is water and fertilizer, no?
So exactly,
You have to be very careful,
Right.
When to blind them, you need to know when you need to add
right, because your root system is growing and you're actually trying to expand that and address that as well as you go. So the young trees are really interesting to manage in that way. You don't want to just focus on where they are, but need to focus them where they are eventually going to go.
Yeah.
That's also the case. But I have seen in newer, younger pistachio orchards, I have seen the drip emitters that are installed, like punched in at each tree, and I'm sure as the trees will grow, they will actually then install more and more. That's how probably some people manage it.
You have to move lines slowly and then drippers slowly in order to make the root zone.
Or you just lose the fertilizers and water and you do. Or you just lose the fertilizers and the water and you apply the full amount and you calculate the amount per tree basis and you apply more. Yes?
Yeah, so that is for now, that would be a good solution to calculate on a per tree basis. And then eventually you are also, just like we mentioned, you're actually accounting for applying water and nutrients for the expanding root system. So you really need to be careful where you're wetting and where you're keeping roots dry, because if you don't irrigate a place where the roots could grow or have grown previously, in the lack of water, the roots can quickly become suberized, a thick, hard layer of suberin deposits on the roots, and they will be no longer active in maintaining the nutrient uptake or water uptake. So basically then you have to really cater to create a situation in the soil where your roots feel comfortable penetrating in and growing. Because I have seen one example in California where the farmers switched the irrigation system from drip irrigation to sprinkler irrigation system in the season. So early on in January, when it was irrigated with one particular system, the roots were growing over there. And when he switched in May to another system, those particular roots were getting less and less water. And he was applying more water, but he was applying water to a place where there were no roots. And in fact, some of his roots were getting superized and not taking up enough water and nutrients. And it had a devastating effect on the crop and the trees. So your roots will grow where your water is. And that's the kind of environment. Okay, great discussion.
Yeah.
So we missed on that, budding activity. Maybe we can just do it in the field tomorrow. We'll catch some opportunity. I'll bring some budding knives, and then we'll have some pruners and have fun in the field.
Yeah.
Slide it.
We will get all this information, am I right?
Yes, this information is
Am
already.
ინფორმაციას
What about some extra information, for example?
ანუ გაგიზიარეთ ამ ინფორმაციას საკმაოდ დიდი მასალა არის ამ თუთას ანუ ჩვენ შეგვიძლია გაგიზიაროთ ინგლისურად, მაგრამ სამომავლოდ ვაპირებს რომ გადავთვალოთ კიდევაც და ხელისას რომ იქნება ქართულ ენაზე, მაგრამ ვერ შეგვიძლია რომ ნათარგმნი მალე იქნება.
ინგლისურ ენაზე.
ეხლა რაც შეეხება ხვალინდელ ასე ვთქვათ გასვლას, მოკლედ ნაწილი გავდივართ სასტუმროში რატომთან ვიყრიბები 9 საათზე, ჩვენი ავტომობილებით უნდა გავიდეთ, ნაწილი ვიდრე მოგესახედოთ პირდაპირ გარდაბნის გადასახურთან მოდით, აი რატომაც ხა მეილში ლოკაცია ჩაგიდეთ, ვინც დაყოფია ხართ. 10 საათზე აუცილებლად რომ იყოთ, ვინც პირდაპირ მოხვალთ გარდაბნის გადასახურთან. 9-ზე დავიძრებით ჩვენ აქედან. მოვინახულეთ სუპერინტენსიურ ბაქს ჩვენიერად ტერიტორიაზე და შემდგომ უკანა გზაზე წამოვართ. შემდგომ უკანა გზაზე გამოვიდით პატარძეულში და პატარძეულშიც მოვინახულებთ ერთ ბაქს. რაც შეეხება კვირას და ორშაბათს, კვირას და მაგაზე ინფორმაციას მოგასვით, ხვალ გამოგიგზავნით, მაგრამ დაახლოებით რომ იცოდეთ კვირას ასევე უნდა შევიკრიბოთ ქვემო ბოდბეში, ხოლო ორშაბათს მოგვიწევს უდაბნოში ჩასვლა.
ბოდბიდან ტრანსპორტირება?
ბოდბიდან ტრანსპორტირება, ბოდბემდე ჩამოხვალთ თუ ჯიპებით 4-4-ზე ჩამოხვალთ ძალიან კარგი იქნება დასვებსაც ჩაისვამთ. თუ არა და ჩვენი მასპინძელი ვინც იქნება ბატონი აშიში შევგვირდა რომ დაახლოებით 12-15 კაცამდე ტრანსპორტირებას ბოდბიდან ბაღში ასე რომ მოახერხოთ ბატონი აშიში. კარგი, მე ახლა მეილს ატოტას გამოგიზამ თუ ის სულთ მის ლოკაცია გამოიყენეთ და პირდაპირ იქ მომზადდით, თხოვთ 10 საათს არ გადააცილოთ.
One question, please. კითხომობს თუ შეიძლება ჩვენ ვისაუბრეთ არაერთ დეტალზე, კვებაზე, სცენარეზე და ასე შემდეგ. მე მაინტერესებს მაინც თქვენი გამოცდილებით ყველაზე დიდ გამოწვევა რა რჩება კალიფორნიელი ფერმერებისათვის. ეს არის დაავადებები, ეს არის კლიმატური პირობები თუ ორივე ერთად ან რაიმე სხვა მიზეზი, რაც ყველაზე დიდი გამოწვევა არის წლიდან წლამდე ფერმერებისათვის.
That's a really important question. Okay, this is really important question, and there are a lot of different challenges in California farmers, and several places, different places have different challenges, and one is water availability, of course. Now, a lot of farmers are getting reduced allocation or no canal water allocation at all. So they are having to rely on groundwater pumping. The state is actually going to put the meters on how much water you can pump out of the ground. So that is really pressing situation. Another is salinity. In a lot of areas, because we are pumping groundwater out, which is loaded with salts, so there are more and more acres of California that are coming under salts, and especially in pistachio and almond growing regions, salts. Disease pressure, not so much, because we are dry Mediterranean climate, so we are, unless we have a really wet spring or bloom time rains, where we can have a lot of diseases. Otherwise, rest of the season, we have minimal diseases. Navel orange worm is one of the major pests of economic importance, so navel orange worm is really a big problem in terms of pest. Lastly, very interesting thing, when I joined California 10 years ago, and I was in Florida, and I was doing research on California situation, just like I'm trying to know about Georgia. And everybody was saying California has a drought situation. And I told my colleagues and interviewers that, okay, number one situation and problem in California will be lack of water. Interestingly, over the next couple of years, I found that in many orchards, it was the opposite. Some of the farmers, out of the insecurity, they were trying to overwater with whatever water they have available. And there are a lot of orchards that farmers are putting more water. So that's where precision irrigation comes in. So sometimes you have insecurity that you might not fall short of water, and you try to push too much. So in some areas, that is also the problem. So these are the things. Climate change, lack of chill, not so much in almonds, but in pistachios and other crops. So I hope that helps. Verticillium has been a problem in California almond orchards where there was cotton planted before. So right after cotton, if they were not fumigated, we had several instances of verticillium wilt, where one side of the tree, one limb will die. I was talking to one of the managers here, and she was interested in learning more, and I promised her that I will pull up my notes from my days when I had experience with verticillium wilt, of what are the major post-planting management strategies for verticillium wilt. I think there are some chemical interventions that the California people recommend. Pre-plant is obviously you can fumigate, but if you already planted the crop, then there are some post-plant chemicals that I need to go back and look. I can definitely help you with that information.
Please, can you give us information about the different varieties, how much nutrients they uptake?
From California, I have Northern and Monterey in my slides. I can show you that. But for the European varieties, we need to look at it.
More American varieties?
More American varieties, we just go with the standard one. And then monitoring, and looking at